Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 260 of the Chronological Read Through the Bible. Today, for my commentary, I'm going to be looking at Nehemiah chapters 1 and 2, just covering a brief commentary of those. Now, Nehemiah, he was an important official in the king's court. Now, I've made mention of this before. It's a little bit of one of these things that we're not 100% sure whether it was King Xerxes' father or whether it was Xerxes' son. Time-wise, it's kind of a debate, as I said, as far as what's taking place there. I did make mention of how the walls had started to be constructed after the building of the temple, but they were paused for 15 years. And so now we find Nehemiah in the court of the king, and some travelers have come from the city of Jerusalem, from Judea, and Nehemiah wants to know, what is the city like? What's going on back in the land? Now, there had already been two groups who had returned. The first group was at the time of Daniel under King Cyrus or Darius, and so they returned. As I mentioned before, that was a small group. And then under Ezra, a group had returned to the land. And that was at the time when, at the same time, Zerubbabel had gone back to rebuild the temple. So Ezra had really brought this kind of restructuring and sort of a revival among those who were in the land, religious revival. But there still were all these people who were left behind in Persia. Just for the sake of time period, I'm going to say, and as I say, it's commentaries are across the board on this, I'm going to say that this was most likely King Xerxes' son, not the son of Queen Esther, but actually of Queen Vashti. So the son of Vashti went on to become the king of the Medo-Persian Empire after the death of Xerxes. So as Nehemiah hears these words, these heartbreaking words, that the temple's been rebuilt, but the people are living in distress. And let me just read this passage to you because it's interesting to see how the people word it. So in verse 3, they said to me, "The remnant is there in the province who survived the captivity. They are in great distress and reproach, and the walls of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are burned with fire." Can you imagine the rubble all around the city? And imagine the distress of the people. The temple's been built, but even though today we don't really think of walls being around the city, at that time period, the wall gave the people their protection. I've been in areas in Africa where every compound would have a wall around it, and that gave you a sense of protection. You may have seen pictures before of walls around houses in foreign countries, and sometimes they'll put little metal shards along the wall, or they'll take old broken Coke bottles and line the top of the wall with that, or more modern, they'll put razor wire along the tops of the walls. It definitely looks better with broken glass at times. It doesn't sound good, but it protects the people within inside. Now, the walls of Jerusalem had been quite large walls, so they didn't even need that extra added security along the top because they were so high. But now they were non-existent, and the gates of the city were non-existent. So one didn't even have to climb over the rubble of the previous wall. They could merely walk through the gate. So as Nehemiah hears this, he can obviously imagine the distress of the people living within the city, the dangers that they faced on a regular basis. Those who would see a quick profit of just being able to walk in through the fallen city gates or the broken down wall and rob the people and then go back into the wilderness and disappear. Nehemiah, his heart's broken because he realizes this just is not fitting for the city of God. And he enters into a state of prayer and fasting and brokenheartedness. But he has a very important job. He is the cupbearer to the king. And I need to say, this isn't just somebody that merely would bring in the goblet of wine to the king. The cupbearer had really a very intimate role before the king. And this is that he was the one who would sample the wine and even the food before the king to make sure that it wasn't poisoned. A number of kings had already been taken out that way through poison in their food, or other rulers and leaders. Typically, the person who held that position was very close to the king, almost like an advisor. Nehemiah would have been well versed in politics of the day. He would have already heard all the things that were taking place politically. They didn't just bring somebody that was a homely looking person to serve in the king's court either. He would have been a very pleasing looking individual. This comes into play because when he stands before the king to serve the king his wine, the king notices something's not right with Nehemiah today. And the king asks, he's like, "You're not sick, so why is your face downcast? Why are you sad?" And Nehemiah tells him, he says, "My Lord, I've heard news of Judea, of Jerusalem, and the city walls there are not existent. The city gates have been burned." And the king asked Nehemiah, "Well, what would you say?" And Nehemiah asked the king if he would allow him to leave and go to repair the city. And the king gives him letters to support this work. He gives him leave from work. The king is very generous, more than generous. This is where we see again the hand of God upon the kings of the Medo-Persian Empire. The Lord is constantly working in the background within the Medo-Persian Empire. He raised them up just for this purpose, to help restore his people, to restore the temple, to restore now the walls of the city, to restore the land. They weren't God-fearing people. They were serving their own desires, but God had already worked in their hearts to prepare them for this task. So as Nehemiah returns in just a short time period, it seems like it was quite the expedition to get back to the land. He takes a group of men with him. So this is now another group, another wave of people returning. And after he settles in for his first day there, he doesn't tell anybody his purpose. He doesn't explain why he's come back from the land of Persia, from Susha, from the capital. That evening, he goes out, just he and a few men. He's on his horse, and he begins circling the city, looking at the walls and seeing the work that laid before them. We're going to see over the next few days of reading that this action of rebuilding the walls, it's not easy, but it does take place in a relatively quick period of time. Again, this couldn't have happened without the king's support. But so quickly, the walls go up, and we're going to see that over the next few days. I just wanted to say we're 7 days out from starting in the New Testament scriptures. And I would like to encourage you to start considering who you could invite to join us on the read through the New Testament and the commentary. The Bible reading app which we use, you can jump in at any time, but this would be an excellent time for those who have maybe fallen away and not been reading along with us, or those who are new, to step in and join us as we enter into the New Testament readings of this chronological read. They're going to be a little challenging because there's days that are overlapping as far as taking each of the Gospels together, but it's a different way for you to see the Gospels as well, because most of the time you just read the book of Matthew or the book of Mark or Luke or John, but this is going to all be interwoven as we see the life of the Messiah unfold chronologically as best as those who broke down this study can do, and we will see his life unfold and the order of events as best as we can tell from how the scriptures lay them out. Well, brothers and sisters, I do hope and pray that you've had a good day. Until tomorrow, God bless.